Good day, everyone. My name is Henry Atampo Pejo from Paisano University. Um, I carried out a study with Dr. Ogedize from University of Botswana. So the title of our study was Essential Transition Components and Curriculum for Students with Disabilities to Transition Successfully to Post-Secondary Education in Botswana. As we all know, after experiencing economic crisis, the economy of Botswana is trying to become a more knowledge-based economy, which means that it is necessary for all students to acquire post-secondary education qualifications, as this will give them an opportunity in their career life and also influence their independence just after school. From a survey in 2015-2016 period, it was found that 56,000 of individuals in Botswana are the ones living with disabilities, and 34% from that 56,000 participate in primary education, and 12% from that 56,000 participate in secondary education, and only 4% of that population participate in senior secondary school, and tragically 0.4% of those people participate in post-secondary education. This shows that there's a decline in numbers as you go from primary education up till secondary or post-secondary education. This shows that there is the reduction in participation by students with disabilities as you go up the education level. So it is necessary for implementation of transition plans from secondary education to post-secondary education in order to alleviate this poor performance or this poor participation by students with disabilities at post-secondary education level. As teachers are the ones that facilitate these transition plans, it is necessary for us to look at their perceptions or their says about necessary transition components and essential secondary education curriculum items that would allow for successful transition of students with disabilities from secondary education to post-secondary education. So the purpose of our study was to examine the senior secondary education teachers' perceptions about what are the critical or essential transition components that influence successful transitioning from senior secondary school to post-secondary education. And also we wanted to look at their views about the relevance of the curriculum in helping students with disabilities to transition from senior secondary school education to post-secondary school education. The other purpose of this study was to examine whether teachers' position as general educators, special education teachers, and guidance and counseling teachers influence their perceptions about the essential transition components and the relevance of the curriculum in influencing successful transitioning of students with disabilities to post-secondary education. Our first question in this study was, what are the perceptions of secondary school teachers regarding transition components that are critical or essential regarding transition planning and programming for students progressing into post-secondary education? The second question was, what is the relevance of the curriculum in helping students with disabilities to transition to post-secondary education? And thirdly, we have a question of what differences are found between teachers by their positions as secondary general education teachers, as special education teachers, as guidance and counseling teachers, regarding their perceptions of critical or essential components regarding transition planning and programming for students with disabilities, and also the relevance of the secondary school curricula in progression of students into post-secondary education. Our study adopted a quantitative research approach as it allowed for establishment of relationships between variables and leading to easier usage of the survey. The research setting for our study was two regions of Botswana, namely Gauteng region and Southeast region. Gauteng region was chosen because it has the highest population of students with disabilities, of which predominantly they are students with visual impairment. And Southeast region was chosen because it contains the capital city Gaborone, which increased the higher possibility of finding more special educators in that region. A cross-sectional survey design was used in the study, with our participants' age ranging from 20 to over 60. And purposive sampling was used to select these participants from the senior secondary schools in the two regions. From the six senior secondary schools that we engaged before carrying out this study, only four participated in our study. And 258 out of 360 senior secondary educators from these four senior secondary schools completed our survey, leading to a response rate of 71.7%. Before carrying out the study, informed consent were obtained from the educators, and all ethical guidelines were followed. Kruskal-Wallis test was used to determine if there were differences between participants' perceptions about essential transition components and curriculum components that influence successful transition to post-secondary education by students with disabilities based on their position as general education teachers, special education teachers, and guidance and counseling education teachers. With the main Whitney U test being used to determine where the differences in perceptions existed. From our study, we found out that teachers' perceptions of essential transition components for students with disabilities to successfully transition from senior secondary education to post-secondary education included a written plan, which has measurable goals and showcases student strengths and weaknesses. They also mentioned that one of the essential components include provision of a variety of activities that would be that would be individualized for every student. And then they also mentioned that specific goals and objectives relating to post-secondary education has to be there in the as one of the essential transition components. And then they also mentioned that there has to be regular assessment of the students before post-secondary education. Some other teachers mentioned that there has to be academical and functional skills training by teachers to students with disabilities as one of the essential transition components. They also mentioned that there has to be collaboration between school staff and external agencies such as support agencies that would be addressing students' needs that can be addressed in the school setting. They also mentioned that there has to be involvement of parents and families in transition planning and service delivery. We also found out that mathematics, science, English language, seasonal language, and optional subjects were seen as irrelevant curriculum items by teachers that would allow for successful transition of students with disabilities into post-secondary education. When it came to their differences in perceptions based on their positions about transition components that are essential for allowing for successful transition to post-secondary education, special education teachers agreed more than general education teachers that there should be a written plan that has specific transition goals, and there should be regular assessment during the transition process, with also the involvement of students, parents, or families in the transition planning process and service delivery during the transition process. General education teachers agreed more than guidance and counseling teachers that they should be both academic and functional skills training during transition planning or during transition of students with disabilities from secondary education to post-secondary education. With guidance and counseling, teachers agree more than general educators that there should be collaboration between school staff and external agencies in order to address the students' need that can't be addressed in the school setting. And also when it came to their differences in perceptions on the relevance of the school curriculum based on their position. General education teachers agreed more than special education teachers that regional language, English language, and science are relevant in influencing the transition of students with disabilities to post-secondary education. And also, general educators agreed more than guidance and counseling teachers that mathematics and optional subjects are very relevant in influencing successful transition of students with disabilities to post-secondary education. From our study, it is worth noting that most of the teachers that took part in our study, they held strong positive perceptions about essential transition components that were mentioned in this study. For example, guidance and counseling teachers, special education teachers, and general education teachers all agreed that it is necessary for students to have a for teachers to draw up a transition plan for students with disabilities. It is also necessary to collaborate with the child's or students with disabilities family during the transition process and service delivery. It is also noted that they together agreed strongly that there should be interagency collaboration between school staff and supporting agencies outside school in order to address students with disabilities needs during the transition process. Another thing is that we also noted that the perceptions of special education teachers and that of those of guidance and counseling teachers did not differ that much when it comes to the transition components that are essential for promoting successful transition of students with disabilities to post-secondary education. This may be because of they are both spearheads of the transition process of students with disabilities as compared to general education teachers. It is also worth noting that the differences in transition perceptions between special education teachers and general education teachers might have been contributed by the fact that they don't mostly collaborate during the transition process or during the education of students with disabilities, leading to them having different transition knowledge. So also the distinct roles of general education teachers, special education teachers, and guidance and counseling teachers contributed to the differences in their perceptions about transition planning as well as inconsistent transition understanding and comprehension. This is because they were trained in different areas. Hence why we find that special education teachers agreed more that they should be agreed more on most of the transition components, and while the guidance and counseling teachers and general education teachers did not agree on most of the transition components. While as in comparison, we can see that special education teachers did not agree that most of the curriculum items are essential for successful transition of students with disabilities to post-secondary education, while general education teachers agreed more than on those curriculum items than the special education teachers. In conclusion, we have noticed the importance of teachers' perceptions about transition components and curricular items that are needed for effective implementation of the transition practices. So there is need for schools to engage teachers in professional development activities in order to minimize their differences in perceptions about these items. And also there is need for generation and maintenance of alliances in both school and outside school settings in order to make sure that both academic and non-academic needs of students during transition process are being met. Here is a list of a few references that one may use for more information. Thank you for your listenership.